This is a movie review of Dinesh D'Souza's Obama's America 2016. I decided to make this review after watching the movie because I had dismissed the movie as probably being just like Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 because of the way that I had seen it marketed, and rather than go on dismissing it in a comment thread somewhere, I decided I was going to watch the movie first and then make my decision about it. So, I watched the movie, and it did strike me as very Michael Moore-esque. In fact, for the first minute, when we're hearing about Kenyan independence versus Indian independence, and basically for the first 9.5 minutes, us hearing just about Dinesh D'Souza and his immigration and education and his debate at Stanford University with Jesse Jackson and his job with the Reagan administration and his thoughts about what happened during the Reagan administration. I got this distinct feeling like this is just like hearing about Flint, Michigan from Michael Moore in his movies. And the first 9.5 minutes of this movie were not about Obama. But then finally, the subject goes back to Obama, and we learn that D'Souza and Obama were born in the same year. They both went to Ivy League schools. They graduated the same year, which doesn't seem that much of a coincidence after they were born in the same year. They were married in the same year again. Probably statistically, if you're born in the same year, you're more likely to be married in the same year. Just saying. And they both had mixed race backgrounds, even though they weren't the same races. Being mixed race, I suppose, it's a valid thing to call a comparison, a parallel in that comparison. So then D'Souza starts comparing Obama to other presidents, and saying that he's not like these other presidents that had similar situations. He's just not like them. And then it goes to some interesting street interviews from Occupy protesters saying that they were, they voted for him, but they didn't get what they wanted. And I, as somebody who followed the Occupy protests, can tell you that I did see that sentiment very much, and it's not something where he was cherry picking there. I saw that all over the place at Occupy protests. Then he goes to a graphic where it shows that 40% of U.S. wealth has left the U.S. since 2007, and says that if your home was $200,000, it would now be worth $120,000 today. Which, yeah, there was a housing bubble. Not really so much the president's fault. It was more, banking regulations and derivatives and all. If you followed the Occupy protests and you actually learned what the core issue was about at Occupy Wall Street, you probably know all this stuff. But he's saying that this is a tragedy that happened during Obama's administration. This decline in wealth in America, and we're about to learn about what Obama did when this tragedy was happening. And then we get this list of all these things that Obama has done, both domestically and with foreign policy, where they don't come out and say it, but I get this distinct feeling that Obama has been sabotaging America from within. They're not saying that outright, but you get this feeling like he only wanted to become president so that he could just dismantle us from within. And make all other countries equal with America. But, that's in just the first 15 minutes you get that feeling. But now it's at around... Now, granted, the version that I saw might not be what comes out on DVD later, because sometimes, you go to a theater, see something, and then it changes with an extended version. But At around 7.5 minutes, there was something that I particularly enjoyed as a skeptic. Dinesh D'Souza comes out and says that Obama was born in Hawaii, and talks about two different newspapers that reported on the birth, and birthers will hate this movie at that point, and that's why the whole movie, that was really the best moment for me. I watched the rest of it, but still, 20 minutes in, the best moment for me happened right there. Now, at this point, at the same time, all of this that happened in the first 20 minutes seemed very Michael Moore-esque to me. Okay? But right at 20 minutes, the style kind of diverges into more of the style that you expect from cold case files on a crime network, where one person is talking and then you see someone acting out the same thing. It's the style definitely changes at this point, and it diverges from the Michael Moore-esque inserting himself into the story all the time. And then D'Souza starts talking about Barack Sr., and how he was a player. He had 3 wives pretty much around the same time, with kids all over the place, or 3 baby mamas at least. I know he said 2 of them were married at the same time. He basically was a polygamist. And then they go into discussing the psychology of absentee fathers. Very Freudian, in looking at the relationship to parents and saying that must be how somebody is driven for the rest of their life. But then we get this thing, it's like a lesson in Hawaiian history that was, a couple minutes long, and I'm like, when is he going to get to the point? And the point was getting to where Obama was in this environment where he would learn basically to hate America and hate colonialism. And then it talked about one of his role models who just happened to be a card-carrying member of the American Communist Party. That was Frank Marshall Davis. They go so far as to print his actual number from his actual card when he was a card-carrying member of the American Atheist Party. They made sure that that he actually had his numbered card. And Frank Marshall Davis, look him up, because he actually was very communist. Then there's a bit of a moment that I could see Michael Moore doing with the failed visit to Granny Sarah, where it was more about the documenter rather than what he's trying to document. He's, again, inserting himself into the story, very Michael Moore-esque. Okay? But then it goes to an interview with the half-brother of Obama in Kenya, talking about his father's death, yada yada. And he's building up to something. And around 50 minutes in, give or take, before the hour mark, he starts talking about anti-colonialism as a sentiment versus anti-colonialism in the past, like our forefathers had, like our first presidents would have had. Like we won an independence war against Britain, and that was us breaking away from colonialism. But then we've got this anti-colonialism in third world countries now, which is anti-American colonialism. And 2 buzzwords get thrown out here, which to me are the kind of buzzwords that the far right base will resound with. And they say that this anti-colonialism is anti-capitalism and anti-Christian. Okay? And just dropping that word in there at that point, just it, I was arguing as to whether this was a propaganda piece, and when I heard that, I was like, yep, it's basically a piece to drum up some solid support on the conservative side of the spectrum, and politically. At around 55 minutes in, right before the hour mark, this horrible notion that Obama only became the president because of his race and his knowledge of how to manipulate people with regards to his race and white guilt it is thrown about. And it's like, wow. Kudos for bringing up the subject, at least, to Dinesh D'Souza, because I don't know of anyone else. I've never seen somebody on this big of a scale with this big of a potential audience discussing this. I've never seen this before, where people are blatantly making the charge that Obama only became president because of his race, because it was the right time, and it was the right time to manipulate that white guilt, and he knew just how to do it. Anyways, then the movie goes on to associate Obama with some former terrorists and radicals from his past, former associations of his, like this bomber named Ayers, and Pastor Jeremiah Wright, which, we've all heard about Jeremiah Wright going, not God bless America, God damn America. That was a big thing during his first campaign, but it's not so much, Obama is guilty because these people are guilty, but like some of their ideas must have rubbed off on him, like hating America, And then at around 70 minutes in, ironically, after making the point in the beginning of the movie that there are Occupy protesters who said that they voted for him, but they were unhappy and they probably won't vote for him again. Ironically, at 70 minutes in, D'Souza makes the point where Obama is in favor of everything that the Occupy movement is in favor of, and the Occupy movement are aligned with his values. And I'm like, not so much. Especially, after this movie was released, right after was the Democratic National Convention, and at the Democratic National Convention, occupiers in Charlotte were, they converged there from all cities all over the country to protest the Democratic National Convention, just like they did the Republican National Convention. They really they see him as the establishment as well, which is weird because by the end of this movie, the entire point of the movie is to say that Obama is anti-American colonialism, right? Anti one group of people in one country having all the power, and he wants to tear it down, And here, these Occupy protesters at the DNC, they were actually protesting Obama as part of the problem. But this movie, about 70 minutes in, is trying to say that they have the same ideals, and it's like, well, they might not think so in reality. Then by the end we get a fiscal irresponsibility lecture, which actually would probably resound well with the Occupy protesters, and that It's about how deficit spending could ruin the country, you know, and financial themes like this. They were what started the Occupy movement. But overall, I would have to say that the biggest moral of the story in this movie is Obama is an anti-American colonialist person who is basically trying to self-destruct the country from within by doing everything he can to make sure that other countries benefit from him sabotaging everything. And that's the end of my review.